Bitcoin has a genuine chance of absorbing a 500 trillion US dollar market because it's not just money, it's a digital property right, a savings technology that is superior over every single other asset. If it would be just money, the market would be a lot smaller. But because Bitcoin is such an amazing technology that can capture real estate, bonds, equity, gold, and all of the other savings technologies and absorbing their financial and monetary premium, BTC is, in my opinion, so much more than just payments. And today's guest, Daniel White, has spent an absurd amount of time researching money the last 5,000 years of our documented history to understand the defining questions of our lifetime. What is money? What is Bitcoin? And how is the connection between money and Bitcoin changing the game for our future? This is genuinely one of the deepest dives I've ever done into the Bitcoin foundations. The following 2-hour conversation has the genuine power to change the conversation around money in the Bitcoin community. Enjoy. And maybe we start off with, what do you think Bitcoin is? Like, what is Bitcoin representing?
Well, best I can tell, Bitcoin represents a very novel property right. Like, it's a non-sovereign granted right of exclusion to valuable property. And from my perspective, that is a very, very, very unique thing in the history of the world, not just like in money, not just in, like technology or anything. Like, it's something that's never really occurred. So it's a really remarkable achievement in its own right in that regard. Like right now, you literally own nothing. And people make that joke like, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And I go, but that's already true. Like, people go, they think of things like natural rights. And I go, I have the right for life. I have the right to freedom of expression. And I go, well, what happens if that right gets violated? And they go, well, but it's not right. It's unfair. I go, well, nobody cares about fair. If someone's pointing a gun at your head and they go, this is my house, and they take your house, and you go, but the rules say, and you go, well, okay, well, I don't see the rules here, but I see me, and I see the guy with the tank, and we're here to say this is not your house anymore, so get off my land, And there's very little you can do about it. So I think it's small comfort to be able to say, well, they violated my rights, while you're walking down the street with a stick and bindle on your shoulder carrying what's left of your possessions. But it's true of everything on you. Like, if someone just, like, everything can be captured, everything can be taken. If you look at your phone, like most people have iPhone or Android or whatever, they go, that's my phone. And you go, is it really though? Like, have you read the terms and conditions of underneath what's going on there? Because, like, you may technically own a pile of things, but like your network access, how you use those devices, what they can do with your data, all that kind of stuff is buried in language that I don't think many human beings have actually read, even the people that wrote it. So you go, well, you don't really own that either. But same thing, house, land, the glasses on your face, like all this stuff is subject to seizure. It's subject to control. Your life in general is subject to seizure and ending just on a sovereign whim. They can just come and kill you. If a Russian missile comes launching over and they got their guidance system wrong and it blew up our studio, what's your recourse? Are you gonna, like, you don't get to go and, well, A, you're dead, but B, like, even if you weren't dead, but all your friends were dead, you go, what are you gonna do? Go knock on Putin's door and say, hey, that missile thing, that was really wrong. You shouldn't have done that. You violated our rights. And you won't even matter. You're not even a mouse fart. And I mean, as a calculation, you're just collateral damage. You're like, well, we lost a bunch of bricks and a few people there. Like, oops, sorry. And then they might make a payment to the Czech government for, sorry about that, didn't mean to. But so you go, well, my rights were violated. Yeah. And, and Bitcoin changes that fundamentally, because you go, well, can the sovereign just come and take your Bitcoin? Do you have it in self-custody? Yeah. Then no. I mean, there's just straight up no. They can sort of force you to give it up, like they can, torture you or whatever. But in terms of like, can they force you? If you are a person who just goes, nope, I don't care. You can cut my fingers and toes off. You can, poke my eyes out, do whatever you want. I'm never giving you those seed words. They can never get the Bitcoin. They can never. There's nothing they can do. There's no force they can bring to bear upon you to take that property right from you. And that has never happened in the history of the world. So that, to me, when people talk about whether it's money or an asset or number go up and all this kind of stuff, I go, I don't think you know where this is going. I don't think anyone on planet Earth knows where the Bitcoin experiment leads. What I can say, having done a very deep dive in deep history pre-time, this is something that is very, very, very unique, very, very precious, and very, very important that we understand as best we can. But what it leads to in the entire global economy, or the way monetary systems work, or how this interfaces with legacy systems or anything like that, I think is a kind of an open question. And I think it's going to be a very remarkable transformation because it's so unique, it's so novel, and it's so different than anything that's ever happened before. So that's the short answer is it's a non-sovereign granted right of exclusion. It's a property right that can't be taken from you. The long answer is like, holy cow, this is a big deal. You know what I mean?
I love that. It really makes me think about where Bitcoin is going, and a lot of people like think about like what's the next steps. Like, okay, Bitcoin is now a thing. Most people look at it as a speculation, as an investment, as like a fund diversification in their portfolio. Most people that watch that podcast look at it very differently.
Right.
They evolve maybe a little bit of their life around it. They maybe are a little bit deeper in Bitcoin. They might even work in Bitcoin. They do something like more sophisticated with Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, it's like that one thing is the unique innovation of Bitcoin that like you can't take it away from you.
Right.
And it has massive value.
Yes.
Like, because I can also make up a word in my mind, and like you cannot get this word, but it has no value.
Right.
Like, because like nobody knows that word. Like, oh. And now all of a sudden with Bitcoin, you can think about 12 words,
Right.
have that in your mind, and nobody knows those 12 words, and they can have 10,000 on them. They can have 10 billions on them.
Yeah.
No, like I don't recommend having 10 billions just in your head, but that's a whole nother discussion. But you could theoretically have like a massive value just in your head with 12 words.
Exactly.
And like store that. And that's a huge value. And I think people don't get how massive this is. Like, if you have gold, if you have real estate, if you have fiat assets like bonds or like currency in your bank account, like those are taken away very easily from you.
Yes.
But even if you have gold somewhere in your house, someone is just like, give me the gold. You're like, no. Okay, I'll shoot you.
And then I'll just
Take it from your hands. I'm like, okay, you can give it to me now, or I'll take it in like 1 minute.
Exactly.
With Bitcoin, it's like once you shoot him, once you do him, all the leverage is on you.
All right.
He can still have the gun, the knife, like all the things that he has in his possession to like torture you, whatever he does to you. But it's still your decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he has no advantage. He has no incentive to just knock you out.
Yeah, like off you. Yeah, exactly.
And with everything else, he has the incentive to knock you off.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's an extreme example, but I think this extreme example makes clear what Bitcoin really offers. While you were here in Vienna and Prague, we talked a lot about that money is basically everything. It's kind of like a language, a communication style, which reaches in everything in there. And it kind of sets the game rules in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I sort of discovered is like there's three kind of primary theories of money, right? And they've been around since the 1800s. There's the chartal theory, which says like a state authority names a unit and compels demand for it, right? Like that's the heart of MMT, and chartalist arguments have gone for a long time. And their idea is like it doesn't matter what the thing is. Like if I am King Dan, and I have decreed that all the people in my land shall pay me in, like tiddlywinks, then tiddlywinks are money. You have to come up with tiddlywinks to pay me. And because you have to pay me, I can then procure real goods and services with my tiddlywinks, right? Just because I've said this is what you must pay in. Now, obviously, like a little piece of plastic or something like that isn't very helpful because it's easy to counterfeit and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the rough charter argument. It's the state authority names a unit, compels demand for it, and therefore can compel resources with that same unit. It can make a unit, give it to you, and say, give me stuff, and you'll go, okay. Then there's commodity theory, and that I think a lot of Bitcoiners sort of orient around the commodity theory. They go, oh, gold was money, and gold is real money, and it's the most saleable good, right? And this is a very, very old story, and there's a vignette that Lynn Alden talks about a little bit with like the mutual want, right? And so their theory says that like if two people want to trade, they have to have a mutual want. If you go, I make shoes and I make shirts, and you go, well, I don't need any shirts, and I go, I don't need any shoes, trade fails. Like you can't, because there's no mutual want, right? Like I have to have something you want, you need something I want. And so commodities come in the middle of that to be the most saleable good, the most wanted, mutually wanted thing. I'll always want gold, you'll always want gold. So it doesn't matter, you know, what particular thing we have to trade, because someone will always trade it for the unit, right? The trouble with the commodity theory, and David Graeber, for those who don't know, was an anthropologist who passed away a few years ago. He was a big guy in the Occupy Wall Street movement. But he kind of came and crept all over that idea and just said, that's a cute story, but there's never been like a barter economy that's developed into a market economy. Like there's just, we have no historical evidence anywhere. No anthropologist anywhere has ever found like, well, these people used to trade shells for beads, and then beads became less saleable, so they moved to gold, and that's how gold became money, right? So it's sort of like, he called it the great founding myth of economics, that this actually occurred, which I think might overstate the case a little bit. And the last one is credit theory, and that was a little more recent one. And technically speaking, if you look at the MMT guys, the modern monetary theory people, they are sort of neo-chartalists, as in they say it's the state compels demand for the unit, whatever. But most money is based on credit. And there's a sound argument to be made to say like, okay, well it makes sense. Like if you're Dell Computers and I'm Apple Computers and we need to trade hard drives or something like that, I don't bring a suitcase full of cash over to you and go, okay, now I need my hard drives, and I'll take my hard drives back. Like they net and, you know, credit on a balance sheet, right? It's on a ledger. So they go, well, last year you gave us, you know, 400 hard drives and we gave you 10 desks, and you gave us 32 desktops and we gave you 15 laptops. And at the end of the year, they kind of look and go, yeah, you owe us X number of currency units, right? But then they're just going to move a ledger entry. They just go, okay, well, here's a debit, here's a credit, and that's how it all nets out. But central banks work off ledgers. They don't print big piles of cash and go, okay, well, we need to take this over to the Bank of New York. They just move entries on the ledger. So the credit story says like all money is credit. And they will actually go back into ancient history, things like Mesopotamia and whatnot. And even back in ancient Mesopotamia, they'd have grain lists and so they were doing entries on ledgers. They'd go, well, Robin brought, 3 scoops of grain and 2 liters of oil, so we owe him, or he owes us, or however. But it was all credits and debts on a ledger. So they say money comes from that. But the problem with all of those stories is they don't capture the moment before. They don't say, well, what happened before you had like a reason to write down debts and credits? What happened the moment before you had a state? Like an estate authority just doesn't manifest out of the blue. Like that's something that has to be created by people somehow, and that logic has to come into being somehow. And the commodity theory, they just go, well, there's no evidence of this ever developing, right? So when I wrote the new book, I took it a step further and go, well, where did the state logic come from? Where did the credit logic come from? Where did the commodity logic come from? And that's the kind of thing that sort of unsettles a lot of narratives around what money is, where it comes from, and why. Because when you start looking at it, what all these people treat as evidence are things that start about 5,000 years too late, And they come in and go, well, like the chartalists will say it outright. They just go, well, assuming a state authority, they can name a unit and compel demand for it. But you go, well, you can't just assume that. You can't just say, well, as long as you have a state, then everything else follows. It's like, no, you have to account for that. But how that monetary unit, that monetary logic comes into being has to be accounted for in your narrative, or else you're leaving out a massive, you're leaving a great big hole in the knowledge, and you can't just fill it with like naked assertions, right? So that's, I don't know if that answered the question or not, but
Yeah, I find it fascinating. And you also, I think you say that because what you found in the book or in the research, you say Bitcoin can never be money, which is a really fun topic.
ooh,
Because I think most Bitcoiners, I don't know if most Bitcoiners, I think there are a lot of Bitcoiners that just see it as an asset and it's like a small bubbly space that maybe just like, oh, like it's money and all of that, because most Bitcoiners are the ones that just like trade on like Coinbase and have like
right,
$100 in it and
right.
like they don't care if it's money or property or rights or anything. They just like want to have the number go up.
Right.
But how did you had the conviction actually before you wrote the book already?
Well, I mean, if you go look at my Twitter, you'll see things that go like Bitcoin is money, right? Bitcoin is the hardest money ever. Like, because I took on the same assumptions, right? I just go, well, like commodity theoretic sort of ideas. Like it's scarce, it's divisible, it can't be debased, so therefore good currency, right? But that was a very uncritical take on what money is, And so when you start breaking it out a little bit further, and you go, well, what are we talking about when we say something is money? So it's I'm sure it's like highly controversial to say to someone like, oh, I don't think Bitcoin can be money, and I think that's going to get people reflexively sort of saying, but it has to be, And I go, well, I think what I'm really saying is like I don't think people truly understand what money is, because they're rooting an idea of what money is. Just like I would say MMT people don't really know what money is, because they say, oh, it's a chartal means of payment, right? And it's based on credits and debts. So they make a lot of assumptions about what money is and what it can do, right? But just like I think Bitcoiners do the same thing from the other direction. They go, well, the gold was the best money we could come up with. That's Lynn Alden's thesis. She goes, well, because of its stock to flow characteristics, it couldn't be debased as easily as something else, and because it held this sort of intrinsic value, it could, became the most saleable good and stuff like that. But when you look at the history of money, those aren't necessarily supportable concepts. And all of these ideas are deeply contested. Like if you go look at the research on monetary history, like there's nobody that's sitting around going, we know exactly where money came from. They all argue about it. And most of them don't care about the deep history because it's contentious and it's really, really hard to unpack. So they just start with their base assumption that they enjoy, and it typically, their base assumption favors whatever institutional arrangement they like. They go, well, we think the state is the powerful thing, so you should be able to have a base floor of employment and just unlimited, printing, and as long as you can summon demand for the unit, then we can make, permanent, like a wage floor and all those kind of things. But the commodity people go, well, what we want is sound savings, and so that's why I favor that as an origin story. And the credit and debt people, they have their little things. They go, well, you can do a lot of social things with debts and credits, and you don't necessarily have to backstop. Like if a bank is failing, you don't have to bail it out and all those kind of things, because you can just move numbers around on a ledger. It doesn't matter, right? But that's a political arrangement that they favor. So because they favor a particular political arrangement, they just attach a monetary origin to the arrangement that they natively kind of want to see happen in the world. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what money is doing, where it comes from, or why, if that makes sense.
Do you think it's possible that we have some kind of like fiat credit system on top of Bitcoin, kind of like we developed it with gold, where central banks or something like that like exists, but they instead of gold hold just Bitcoin, and then we trade fiat tokens that don't really have anything to do with Bitcoin, but kind of backing the system?
I mean, anything's possible, right? Like I'm not a prognosticator of the future. I can't, I'm not a fortune teller, right? But what I can say is like I hear a lot of people say, well, Bitcoin is money. And I go, okay, well, you're making the affirmative assertion, so prove it. Like prove that it's money. And I don't think, I think when people say that, they have a lot of heuristics and assumptions in the back of their head. They go, here's some shortcut ideas that define money for me enough that I can understand what I'm dealing with, right? But you can't, if you're talking about investing into an asset, or if you're talking about taking on an asset or something like that, like like you wouldn't, well, maybe somebody somewhere goes and buys a stock because they vibed it. They go, oh, I kind of vibe with this stock, so I'm just going to buy stocks, right? But I think most sound investors will spend some modicum of time understanding what are they doing, what are they building, what are they saying, does that line up with reality? So if you're making a statement that goes, well, Bitcoin is the hardest money ever created, I go, okay, do you understand what that means? I go, of course, because it's sound, because it can't be debased. I go, well, but you're saying it's money, so how does money work? And I don't think anyone's ever really thought much beyond that. They have an idea about like commodity theory. They have an idea that gold used to be the hardest money, but because of certain physical characteristics. But I don't think they've ever really stopped to unpack like, well, what does money really mean? Because even just the textbook definitions, you go, well, it's a unit of account, it's a store value, it's the standard of deferred payment. And I go, well, which of those does Bitcoin do? You go, well, is it a unit of account? Like, can you use Bitcoin as a unit of account right now? I go, well, I mean, you could, but it's not a reliable unit of account. Like, you wouldn't want to be accounting for your life's worth in Bitcoin because, like, today you're worth X, tomorrow you're worth X something else. And so the assumption comes in, well, after a bunch of things that I don't know how they're going to happen, then it will become the unit of account. I go, that's a lot of assumptions for something that you don't have any evidence for, right? Is it the standard of deferred payment? Can I hold Bitcoin today and sign a contract in it and know that I have to deliver that same amount of Bitcoin a year from now? Will that contract hold? You go, I mean, if you got some people that are real hardcore about Bitcoin, they might do that. But, outside of that, like if you asked Trezor or, the Bank of New York Mellon, go, hey, settle contracts in Bitcoin 2 years from now, 5 years from now. You go, are you crazy? I can't do that because I can't plan a business. I can't plan for tomorrow, let alone 5 years from now, based on a Bitcoin standard or whatever that might be. So is it a medium of exchange? Go, well, can you exchange Bitcoin? Of course. Do people routinely use Bitcoin to exchange things? Of course. Do people routinely exchange baseball cards for things? Of course. Do people routinely exchange favors for things? Of course. So that's all money because you can exchange it? Well, not quite. It doesn't quite work that way, right? So if your definition of money is fluid, then of course anything can be money. But if you really try and lock down the definition of money, you go, oh, this gets a lot tougher, right? Like, it's one thing to say, like, I can trade for my cocaine in Bolivia using Bitcoin and no one's going to know and it's a private transaction and I can't be debased and yada, yada, yada. And my core thesis says, well, that's not enough to make a durable, scalable monetary order like the US dollar or a euro or a Czech krona or anything like that, right? Like, those require other things that provide the stability of the unit of account status, the medium of exchange status, the legal tender status, the compulsory tax status, the payment of fines status, and the standard of deferred payment. Right now, Trezor Studios can sign a contract with this building priced in Czech kroners, and a year from now, everyone's going to be just fine unless the Czech government goes bonkers and just decides to massively inflate their currency. They'll still be able to settle their contract a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Yes, we are being debased slowly over time. And yes, that adjusts, but it's a relatively predictable adjustment phase, right? So when someone talks about Weimar Germany, that wasn't predictable. They went from 0 to 10,000x in a very short period of time. So no one could plan around that, which is why the currency collapses. But if you have a relatively stable system with relatively stable demand, with relatively stable markets, with a relatively stable sovereign, then you end up with a relatively stable unit that the sovereign sort of abuses to maintain social cohesion within the state authority area. So how does Bitcoin come to represent all of those things and all of those transactions? I go, that's tough. Like, I get why people think that way because they use money every day, they see money every day, and they think, oh, money is for me to save my energy and to save and to earn. And I go, but that's not what money is really doing behind the scenes. Money is coordinating obligations and claims across heterogeneous populations, across borders, across everything. And the example I always give is like, I can right now go online, place an order through Temu or through Alibaba or something like that, and have, I could have a ton of titanium plates show up at my house, or I could have a ton of, widgets show up at my house. And everybody in that chain understands exactly what is happening. And everybody in that chain will settle that transaction because they have a claim, I have a claim, we're trading claims. All those things are being, facilitated by this coordinating technology, which is the monetary unit. Somewhere in the middle, the sovereign is extracting from that, and it's just taking a little bit, but that's how the sovereign provisions themselves. But that's how the sovereigns always provisioned themselves since the beginning of time. Before we had anything that looked anything like money, they were taking their slice. So if you're a Mesopotamian grain laborer, they would advance you some seed. You would go plant the seed. You'd have to come back and give them a third of the seed extra over on top of what you. So they got to stack a bunch of seed. So you go, oh, so wheat is money. You go, of course not, right? But that's how the state provisioned themselves at the time. But because you can coordinate claims and obligations across heterogeneous populations, you don't have to have a constant presence of force, and everybody can roughly coordinate based on that rough metric. You can do things like scale a market. You can scale state capacity. You can scale public works projects. You can scale how you build things and build armies and defend yourself, and all those kind of things can scale because of that technology, which becomes money over thousands of years. So to say you can just replace that with a thing because I have an idea, I go, that's, you're asking a lot. I mean, in the book, I argue it's an overtaxed noun. Like, you can just say money, and people just have a lot of assumptions, but no one's really talking about what level of money we're talking about, what layer of the institutional order we're talking about. And so that's where it gets confusing. I hope I'm not rambling here, but when someone says, like, can this become like the reserve unit, or can it become this, I go, potentially, if someone has some creative way to do that, but I just don't see how that manifests in the world necessarily. I can see some pieces of it being, co-opted by Bitcoin or being used by Bitcoin, or Bitcoin can fill that role. But in terms of creating like a durable, scalable monetary order where everything's denominated in Bitcoin, everything's priced in Bitcoin, the stable unit of account is Bitcoin, I go, I don't see it. I don't think there's a historical analog for that kind of asset to become that sort of thing. And I don't think I don't see necessarily a viable path for like how that becomes a durable, scalable monetary order.
Interesting. I mean, there's never been something like that in history, anyways. Like that's the hard part with Bitcoin, right? It's like we don't really have anything to compare it to.
Well, oddly, there is one sort of rough comparator, because like the one big problem with my monetary theory is it presumes state capacity, right? It says durable, scalable monetary orders arise in conjunction with state capacity and state power and sovereign authority, and like how a state provisions itself. It uses money as the most durable way to do that, right? That's the technology that's the coordination technology that allows these things to scale. But in West Africa, for a few hundred years, they had a durable, scalable monetary system where people would pay their taxes and they would trade amongst each other, but there was no sovereign issuer. It was cowrie shells, right?
Oh.
And so people talk about cowrie shells and they go, oh yeah, cowries were, like when Lynn Alden talks about cowries, she says, well, there's, the most saleable good, it got replaced by gold because, it had superior stock to flow characteristics. And I go, well, that doesn't really line up with the historical case of cowries. And cowries were a polycentrically ordered, durable, scalable monetary system that blossomed and flourished without a central issuer. Nobody told anybody to do it. It was literally the first and only truly decentralized monetary network I've ever seen in the history of the world. Not to say something else hasn't happened somewhere. Most of history is lost to time. Most little cultures are dust. Like, we'll never know what they did. We'll never know what they lived like or anything like that. But that one survived, and that one you can go look at, and there's a ton of research around the Cowrie circuit. And what you see there was a sort of unique situation where cowries would come from the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean, but Maldivian rulers would limit how many cowries you could take out, right? So if you ran a ship back in the day, you could sail from West Africa to the Maldives. You could go talk to the king and go, hey, can I scoop up some cowries? And you go, yes, of course, if you pay your tribute and whatever it is they required for you to scoop up some cowries. They'd limit how much you could take out, and you could take it back down to West Africa, and you could buy shit with it, right? So it's just like straight trade, right? You go like, hey, I've got these cute, shiny shells that are easily counted. They're relatively uniform, and you can exchange them anywhere. The thing that makes the Cowrie circuit sort of unique is like they are not valuable. Like you can get them on eBay right now for like $1. I mean, they're naturally occurring. They just kind of grow. They're like a waste product of nature, right? So when you say, "Oh, it's the most saleable asset," you go, "Is it really though?" Because it's just the shell, dude. Like little kids in the Maldives can just go scoop those up by the bucket load. But if they had had a ship and could get to West Africa, they could have traded a bucket load of their cowries that they just got for free. For they could buy a slave or a bunch of palm oil, or they could buy textiles or whatever it was. But so what you had was like a sort of a relatively difficult source. Like it would take some expense and some risk to sail a ship in 1600 from West Africa to the Maldives and scoop up shells and then bring them back. So there is that aspect of it, right? But as they brought shells in, like shells would get lost. They would, shells break. Someone would have a bag of shells and they'd go off in the desert and die, and no one would ever find. So there's a certain amount coming in, there's a certain amount going out every year. So it was like a rough equilibrium in the replenishment cycle, I think. And this is pure theory. Like there's no evidence to support the dynamics of the economics there. But it looks to me, based on the evidence I've seen, that's kind of what it looks like was happening. You have some cowries coming in, some cowries going out. So new currency units, cowrie shells would come into the circulation. People would trade amongst themselves, and then other currency units would retire due to breakage, loss, theft, ship sinks, whatever. Cowrie's gone, right? So it wasn't like there was just like a fixed supply, and then they just increasingly got more and more valuable over time. Like that I don't think would have stabilized that order. But there is a king in West Africa that said, "I prefer cowries over gold because they're more stable. I know what the value of a cowrie is over time. I don't know what the value of my gold is." So as an elite hoarding asset, before there was like mature monetary systems with complex credit instruments and all that kind of stuff, gold was a great hoarding asset because everyone knew it had some sort of value, like as a prestige good or as a ritual item or whatever it was. But in terms of like using that as a monetary unit, it wasn't great. So much so that the king of this thing preferred this shell that little kids can pick up in the Maldives because he knew that the value of that thing was more stable over time. And I think that was partly because of the replenishment dynamic. The really, really interesting thing about the Cowrie circuit is when European traders arrived in the 17th century, they brought like way bigger ships and way bigger capacity. And when they went to the Maldives, it wasn't like they were begging for the king. They were showing up going like, "Hey, we can bring you a ton of stuff, but we want cowries because we can go get a ton of stuff for cowries, and we got a ship full of this stuff." So they flooded the cowrie market. They massively inflated the raw number of currency units in circulation. So massive inflation, just like the debasement we had in 2008. On a scale probably even larger. The thing that makes that interesting is it didn't just collapse cowries. What happened was the cowrie circuit actually got bigger. It went further inland, trade deepened. You had inflation. Like in the early part of the 16th century, you could buy a slave for 10 cowries. By the end of the European occupation and colonial times, like it would take 10,000, right? So obviously the currency unit was being debased, but that didn't necessarily mean cowries. Like there are still markets today where you can trade cowries for goods to this day. It's that resilient, it's that durable, and there's no one telling anybody to do it, right? But the fact that you could inflate the unit massively with massive European imports, and still it didn't, not only did it not collapse the system, it made it stronger and more durable and reach further inland. You're going to go, well, that complicates things when you talk about scarcity as a thing, or the inability to inflate a unit and go, well, that always destroys currency. You go, well, the only truly decentralized monetary system that I've ever seen on planet Earth looks to me like when you inflated the currency, it actually made things better. So, what do you do about that? And it's a complicator for the Charles story because there's no sovereign demanding payment in it. It's a complication for the commodity story because this is not a commodity. It's just a dinky little shell that just nature produces just cuz. And it's a problem for the credit theory because you go, well, where are all the debits and credits here? It's like, it's not. It's just people trading because they want to, because they chose this thing. And their ordering and the way and their shared arithmetic around what cowries are worth and all that kind of stuff developed not spontaneously, but like polycentrically, right? Everyone kind of just started to agree on this thing, and then it became a thing. And you go, well, how do you recreate that? And I go, that's tough, but it doesn't look like Bitcoin. Like when I look at the characteristics of Bitcoin, I go, well, the only other decentralized thing I can compare that to looks very different to me. Bitcoin does not have a replenishment dynamic. Bitcoin is continually becoming more and more scarce. Issuance is becoming tighter, and you're always losing some number of currency units every single year. Loss, theft, death, just fat fingering something, sending Bitcoin to a bad address, whatever it is, you're always, the float is always decreasing and the issuance is always decreasing. So you go, how do you stabilize that? Because if you really need a replenishment dynamic, then to achieve some measure of polycentric stability, and you don't have that, then you end up in Gresham's law, right? You go, well, you're always going to want to hoard the Bitcoin. Like, why would you ever spend the Bitcoin if you know forever and ever and ever, the value of the currency unit is going to go up. The amount of things you can get with the currency unit goes up. And I haven't heard anybody tackle that. They say, well, it's divisible. And I go, well, that solves a math problem, but that doesn't solve a value problem, So tell me if I'm in the weeds here, because I know I'm kind of getting into some really deep stuff, but
There's a lot in there.
Exactly.
But no matter if you already have self-custody or still have your Bitcoin on exchange, your generational wealth that you have in Bitcoin could be completely at risk. And that's why I highly recommend to you to give the Bitcoin Way a 30-minute free consultation call to check how secure your custody setup really is and what you can still improve. So head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin. Again, that's the bitcoinway.com/Robin and get your free initial 30-minute call with the Bitcoin Way.
So also one argument is like, because the number go up, technology of Bitcoin, the thing that most people love about Bitcoin, they just like buy and hold it, that kind of prevents it forever being a currency, because people always choose something else as a currency first.
right.
They always like, and it makes sense because like even I'm like, I rather trade my euros, and I have to have some euros because it's more stable in the short term, as you said with the Cowrie, with the king that preferred the Cowrie over the gold, because Bitcoin has a volatility of about 40 to 60, 50, somewhere around that.
Right.
Maybe more. Let's see where we end
Yeah.
up with this in this bear market. And so if you have always the possibility of a 50% crash or a 50% uptick, it kind of is hard to predict something. Like,
Yeah.
I told you I'm gonna move soon, and with moving there's always costs involved.
Right.
You have to like buy new furniture, get the old one, like move, get a rental car, like get all those things going.
Right.
And so like it makes sense for me to like, okay, I know I have in like a few months some more costs that I incur, more than I usually have.
Right.
Do I want to keep that in Bitcoin? Do I want to like hope that it stays stable or goes up in that time? Probably not, because like I don't know what Bitcoin is doing in the next 3 months.
Right.
Like I have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
Binance could go under in that 3 months,
Right.
and we had like 20K.
Yeah.
Apple could announce that they are buying Bitcoin, and we had like 200K.
Right.
Like how can I know of that value?
Yeah.
But I know the euro will probably be around in 2-3 months. Like I'm fairly certain.
Chances are good. Yeah.
Chances are quite good for that.
Right.
And if not, I probably see that before already, and can change in dollars or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it does make sense for me. Like, yeah, you have your like local fiat currencies, the stable thing, rather stable thing. One thing I was wondering is, Bitcoiners often like to say, I mean, Lynn Alden's book title is like that, like broken money.
Right.
Our money is broken. It's garbage. It's like it's horrible. It's all those things. And you kind of disagree with that. Like it's not that bad.
Well, I think it's bad for end users, right? But I think end users assume because they use money that money is for them. And if you look at the history of the world, money is not a technology for you. It's a technology for the state, right? It's a technology for the sovereign. So when someone says like Bitcoin is money, I go, well, so you're saying the sovereign benefits from the use of Bitcoin. I go, no, it benefits the users. I go, the users aren't what's important in money. What money is, I think, first and foremost for is the coordination of claims and obligations, right? And if you say, so like when people say that, like broken money, like money's broken. I go, if you go talk to any guy on the street and just say, hey, this thing is, money's broken, fiat doesn't work. If they're not a Bitcoiner, if they're not a gold bug or something like that, they're going to go, what are you talking about? I use money every day. It works just fine. You go, yeah, but if you try and save in it, blah, 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 you're going to get debased. And, you're losing 2% a year just on the books, like just by their public statements. But the reality is you're losing 10 to 12, 15% a year in purchasing power. And they're going like, what are you talking about? Like, I bought a coffee at Starbucks last year for €2, and tomorrow I'm going to buy a coffee at Starbucks for €2. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how's it broken? Like, well, but it's harder to save, and the prices are going up, but there's such a disconnect there, right? So to say it's not working, you go just at the fundamental pleb level, like the just average Joe average in the street, they go, money works fine. But if you're talking about how do businesses coordinate across the globe, you go, money is broken. Really? So you mean I can't like order some oil and have it delivered to my field so I can process it into petroleum products and then put that on a ship and then coordinate some tractor trailers to deliver petroleum products around the world and then deliver that to a plastics factory that can turn some into plastics and deliver to another that can use it for fuel and deliver that to another that can make textiles out of it. Like, that doesn't work anymore. Well, I mean, of course, you can coordinate all these massive global supply chains. So it's not broken on that level, but yeah, I mean, it's broken because I can't save as much this year. I go, nobody cares if you can save, right? What the people that are issuing the currency care about is, can we keep this coordination game going, right? Can we still coordinate resources across the globe? Can I still make sure a truck is manufactured and can drive on a road that is being maintained and is lit by electricity and is delivering products and then or turning those into other products, and that people can rely on all of these chains without continually like showing up and going, hey, you still owe me for the road. Like, we built that road last year and you didn't pay for it. And like, can you keep this game of resource coordination flowing without constant force, without the same universal language, without the same universal rules and laws and all this kind of stuff? And money is coordinating all of this stuff. Money is coordinating global trade, global everything. Claims and obligations all around the world settle routinely in this really magical sort of thing that you kind of go, holy shit, how do you do that? Like, if you just came to a planet with a bunch of monkeys on it and said, okay, we need to figure out how to create cities and global trade and all this kind of stuff, go. You go, how? Like, the monkeys don't even agree on the time of day. They don't even agree on, like, what is a good thing or what's a bad thing. Like, how do you get them to do anything? And so if you go back 10,000 years, you go, well, how did the Mesopotamians do it? They go, well, like, if you have a group, 100 people living in a village and all of them are hunting and gathering, no one has to coordinate anything. They just go, you hungry? Yeah, well, go shoot a squirrel, dude. I don't know. Why are you talking to me, right? You need some shoes? Go make some. Like, why are you bothering me about this stuff? But if everyone is tied to a resource node, if they kind of hunt and gather, so everything's kind of gone around their local area, and they go, oh man, we don't have any food around here. Like, we've been looking for months and there's no food. But they come across a field and they go, hey, we can eat that, and it grows here every year. Let's just eat that. We'll stop moving, and everybody can get fed. But then the second you do that, the second you put down roots and say, okay, we all need to make sure that this crop shows up every year, you've introduced into the world some complications. Like, well, who guards it? I don't know. We just kind of do it whenever. Yeah, but now there's 1,000 of us, and Tom's a lazy bum, and Sue doesn't always, and sometimes, and Fred walks off once in a while. So somebody has to guard this. So you go, okay, well, how do we make it fair for so and so to guard it? Well, how about we all get together and we'll just, like, when the harvest comes, we'll take a little bit out and then we'll sort of dole it out equally. Like, you're responsible for making sure the ditch gets cleared, and you're responsible for making sure the path to the ditch is clear, and you're responsible for deciding which way the water goes and who gets their field watered and so on and so forth. And then we'll collectively store up all this stuff, and then we'll disperse it when winter comes and everyone needs to eat, right? So there's less fighting. So we're going to coordinate by credits and debts. You owe so much time for digging a ditch, and you paid too much grain, so you don't have to dig a ditch. And you see what I'm saying? So you need to start coordinating obligations in a community. If you just scale that over 10,000 years, you get this, is sort of my rough thesis. I mean, that's a highly compressed version of it. And if that's truly the nature of all these kind of things, then the rest of these questions about like, is money broken, or is it working, or is it not? You kind of go, it's no more broken than it was when you were the guy who was like, yeah, but my crop didn't come up this year, and I still owe 33.3% grain. Like, that's not fair. Wheat is broken. Like somebody was complaining about that back in the day. Someone was complaining about how these obligations were unfair, weren't being reconciled correctly, and that becomes a political problem. That becomes like a communal problem. But it's not a monetary problem. It's not a money is broken problem. It's well, we just need to alter the rules a little bit so this is more fair. But that's a never-ending process. Like, you're always going to be struggling with fairness and coordination, and how you get claims to be recognized, and how you get obligations fulfilled, and all that kind of stuff. It's not something that can be fixed. It's something that is continually being tweaked.
I asked you that the other day at dinner if it's fair to say money is a language. Because like I found it a fascinating, because you talked about coordination, and it's like how to coordinate, how do you coordinate the monkeys to like do all that,
Right.
those things. Is that still like, is that how you can simplify it a little? Like, because we talk a lot about like what is money and like what is Bitcoin in that context. And I always like to make it simple because brain is not working that good. As like how can I break it down to like the most simple explanation to like a 5-year-old, like what actually like money is?
Right. Well, as a language, I mean, you could kind of shoehorn that in there, and I think like Breedlove is kind of talking about that a little bit lately, and there's some other gal that was talking about it you had mentioned, which I think is sort of a unique idea, and yet at the end of it, if that language entails like the state needs to provision itself, that's the language you're speaking. Like, the state is trying to coordinate obligations so the state can scale state power, and through the scaling of state power, they use this thing called money to coordinate all of these activities without having to exert continual force, right? Like, you don't have to go and whip somebody daily to make sure they go dig the field. Their name is on a ledger. They owe a certain amount. They know there's some consequence to not fulfilling that obligation, and somewhere in there they're going to receive a reward for that they can use somewhere else, right? So you go, that's the coordination game that's happening. So if you call that a language, you go, well, it's a kind of an interesting language, but it's a very subtle one that's converting, like, I'm going to bonk you on the head unless you do something, into something that almost feels voluntary, right? So it's as a language, as a shorthand, it might be suitable, but I think you run into the same problems by calling it a language as you would calling it like a thing, right? Like, you're going to quickly run into like the constraints of that noun versus a different noun, So the closest I've come is like the coordination tech, right? Like, it's just a technical means to coordinate obligations and claims, but I don't know, if you're trying to explain it to a 5-year-old, like, I can recognize even as I'm talking through this, that it's just like, this is kind of dense. It's tough to sort of wrap your head around some of these ideas.
It's a complicated thing. Like we're like, how many, like 8 billion people,
Right.
and we use like different kind of forms of money. Like, we're now in Czech, we use Czech krona. We just came with a train ride 4 hours from Austria.
Right.
There we used euros.
Right.
Just 20 years ago in Austria, we would have used the shilling, not the euro.
Right.
So it's like constantly changing. It's different in different continent. Like, you just drive an hour with a car and you have a different currency there.
Right.
So it's a very complicated topic. It's not a like
Yeah.
it is by nature a tense topic.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's what makes it difficult, right, for everybody to wrap their head around, whether you're a economist or a laborer or a plumber or whatever. Like truly understanding what all that means is problematic, right? Like, and most people deal with the level that they're at, right? If you're the CFO of, Chase Bank, you look at money very differently than the plumber looks at his money. He sees a bank account and he goes, "Oh, that's my money." But the CFO of Chase Bank he's not even thinking in that same realm. And when you start talking about large numbers like 8 billion people, like people can't even wrap their head around like 100,000 people, what that really means, like, so when you start talking like exponentially large numbers, people like, it just checks out. So much so that people will talk about, oh, the national debt's 32 trillion in the United States or whatever. And you go, do you really know what that means? Like, do you know how big of a number 32 trillion is? And
I think we're soon hitting 40.
yeah, oh yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But that's the thing is you kind of go, well, but it's all broken. It's all going to collapse. It's all going to fall apart. And it goes, so you're saying all of society is going to collapse because somebody made the number too big. I go,
I mean, if that would be the case, like that's actually something I was thinking a lot about, because if like, oh, they have too much debt and the system will fall apart.
right.
Wouldn't that already be the case? Like, isn't 40 trillion already a lot?
Oh, yeah.
That's a truckload.
Yeah. That's, yeah, more than a truck. It's like a city blocks load, There's a great website called Demonocracy, like Demonocracy, not Democracy. And they do graphic representations of what $1 trillion actually looks like.
Oh yeah, I saw that on
You're-
Twitter. I think,
you
like,
know?
the comparison of like
Right.
what a million is, what a trillion is, and
Yeah.
what a billion is.
Yeah, so like $1 million is kind of like this couch, right? Like, or maybe 2 or 3 of these couches. That would be a stack of like $20 bills, US dollar bills in a pile is $1 million. $1 trillion is like the city of Manhattan if you stacked it up, right? So when you talk about that kind of scale, like they put, they go, well, this is the amount of debt that just Chase Bank holds. And it's like bigger than the Chase Bank building if you stacked it up as dollars. So you go, okay, well, that seems like kind of a lot if you were looking at it as a volumetric sort of scale. But obviously, that's not how people are accounting for things. But that's how most people use money, is they think about it in volumetric terms. Like, I've got $1,000, I'm doing pretty good, But if someone's a millionaire, they're not walking around with 3 couches of bills. They've got a number on a computer somewhere. And it's, so when people are talking about these kind of topics, when it comes to the scale of the issue, I think they really underestimate it, right? And I don't think there's a real accurate way to say like how much value is on Earth based on a number unit, like what's the value of the internet? What's the value of like the city of Austria? Like someone might assign a number to it, be like, well, we've got so many square feet of buildings and so many miles of road and so many electrical lines and yada, yada, yada. But then you go, well, okay, but what about all the economic activity that's occurring within and how many resources being coordinated? Like the rail system in Austria is amazing, right? The rail system on the east coast of the United States, where it's kind of similarly dense, kind of sucks. I mean, it's functional, it works, but it's nowhere near what they're doing in Austria. You go, well, so what's the value of one versus the other? Do you measure that by number of passengers served, how many miles how smooth the ride is, like how nice the coffee cup is? Like, I mean, there's like a underneath the trillions of dollars of debt, you also have trillions of little economic things that are happening underneath it all. And it's all sort of like working, right? Like so much so that we can just take it for granted. We can wake up in the morning and complain like, God damn it, my ground beef is $2.50, and last week it was $2.40. This is ridiculous, But you go, do you realize what it took just to get that little chunk of meat to your grocery store, and that you have a selection that you can go, oh, this is a little brown in the corner. I don't want that one. I want this one. It's fresher. I mean, like, it's just absolutely astonishing to me, like how much of this is so seamless that we can just go, yeah, it's just normal. This is normal, and it's not good enough yet. It's not as good as I want it to be. Therefore, we need this hole is going to collapse because my beef went up 50 cents this week. It's like, come on, dude. Like, there's a great big world out there, and there's a lot of economics happening under the hood. And just because it's invisible to you doesn't mean it's not happening. You know.
I was thinking about the language thing because the coordination, and then I was thinking how you're from America, you're native English speaking. I'm from Austria, natively German speaking. We're going on a Czech stage where in a country where they speak Czech, but we all kind of just like up to English. Like even here with the crew, we were like, okay, like you're from Poland, from Czech, from Austria, and we all have our native language.
Right.
But like, what are we using as like our coordination language?
Right.
It's English.
Right.
Why are we using English? Because we all have like it's the smallest denomination that we can all kind of like use. If you
Cohere
like,
with,
it's the one thing that kind of all combines it with. And so I was also thinking like that's a really interesting way to look at it, because if you have a fiat system and you call the fiat system English, or like a fiat system like the money that we're currently using, it's really hard to break into that because you need an overwhelming majority to use that to actually like switch to a new system. So I'm when I started coming into Bitcoin, I think I told you this already, but I'll tell it on the podcast again. When I started coming into Bitcoin, I was on Twitter. I was like, Bitcoin is money. Like it's like will take over the world. Fiat will collapse in 5-10 years.
Right.
I kind of had that belief. Then I started doing the podcast. I started doing talking with a lot of great people, about 600 different guests at this point, which made my perspective go from this to like this,
Right.
which is like all the difference.
Yeah.
And I was like, like this fiat system is really strong. I mean, look at Argentina. They make a new currency every 10 years
Right.
on
Yeah.
average the last like 50, 60 years. So it's like, okay, even if it collapses, even if the US dollar actually collapses tomorrow, they just come up with something new and the people will use it. And I found that comparison with language interesting because to a degree, the government is involved in language because you go to the government to Austria, they have the German things. Like
Right.
if you want to get married in Austria, you have to translate everything from English or other languages to the German language because they're like, we only accept the German thing.
Right.
And so like the same with taxes in Austria, you have to pay it in euros. You cannot pay it in shilling anymore. You cannot pay it in US dollars. You cannot pay it in Bitcoin.
Right.
You have to use this one system.
Exactly.
And so I found it interesting, this coordination and how the government is involved, but still how also the people are involved.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because if people just like use other systems and it's just like, I don't want to use the dollar, and all of a sudden like nobody uses this thing, like it kind of shifts. But it has a very sticky network effect,
Oh my God. So sticky.
which would like, even if we would go to the experiment of like Bitcoin is taking over that, I think we're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of years that the whole process would take in order for like that to facilitate, if it's possible.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, maybe coordination is separate from saving. Like coordination and
entirely different.
exchange and unit of account is just separate. And Bitcoin will just be the best savings technology, the best property, the best like investment, the best asset, whatever you want to call it. And we just use like our small credit things and tokens to like move around, and I don't know, stable coin. I don't know like how fiat currencies will
I don't think anybody does. That's the beauty of it, right? Like, and as you were talking about it, it occurred to me like if nobody in this room spoke English except for you, like I spoke Russian and they spoke, Czech and Polish and whatever, we could still make this happen just by pointing and having a number, right? Like we can coordinate all of this stuff without ever sharing a single verb. We just go, money. And they go, yeah, 1,000. You go, 1,000 what? USD or krona? But there's that sort of apex layer, right? The US dollar, because it's kind of underpinned global trade for a long time.
Same as English.
Correct. In English even longer because of the Brits, right? So they've been coordinating global trade for a few hundred years before we started doing it. But you know, just because of certain things that happened after World War II, like the U.S. just ended up in a position that nobody wanted them to be in, but they ended up in that position anyway. They had all the gold and they had all the productive capacity. So you go, well, we need to restabilize this thing that we just blew up because this is a problem and we don't want all this to go away. So even after the worst, most catastrophic human-induced event in history, World War II, where they literally flattened cities in all throughout Europe, and they destroyed heavy industry, and they destroyed roads, and they destroyed infrastructure, and you can't even see it today. It's all overgrown. Like whatever last remnants are either monuments or fields. You know, like it's just gone. But there are like you can go find pictures. Well, they'll show like here's a French street, like here's World War II, and here's today, and there's like beach, and someone's walking with their kid, and they're playing ball on the sand, and here there's like some dead guy, and like and the buildings collapsing, but same buildings, and you go, wow, how'd that happen? Well, because they got that they reestablished the coordination network, and they said, hey, we need a more stable way to do this, and it ended up being the U.S. dollar. But now, like, I can settle because you say, yeah, we used euros and this and that. I use dollars. I use dollars every single leg of this trip. There's not a single. I don't have a single euro in savings. I don't have a single Czech kroner in savings. I don't have a single credit card that's denominated that I'm going to pay the bill in kroner. Like, it gets exchanged, and it's all automatic, and it's all in the background and I just see number, yes or no. That's it, right? And it's all because I'm carrying a little piece of plastic around. You go, that's pretty remarkable because just 50 years ago, this was more of a pain in the ass because I would have had to stop somewhere and then pay a third party to do the transfer. And I got to check the rates and I got to look at the newspaper today to see what the rates are, to see if it's a good time to trade my pounds sterling for my, Austrian shilling. And now I got to trade Austrian shillings for Czech kroner. And then when I get back, I got to, but, so I need to bring dollars in and trade with somebody to trade with somebody else to trade with somebody. So they've just removed all that friction. They just go, well, just move it around, but it's all dollars to me. Like I haven't spent a single euro. I just happen to hold some euros for the minute. And then, for like all of 10 seconds, I had a euro that just, it went dollars, euros, now it's your euros, right? But me in the middle, just like, all I did was hit some buttons. All I did was tap a card and somewhere some robot just went, oh yeah, we need to change this number to this number and this number to this number. And now they're more than happy to let me on the train. Pretty remarkable. Like it's broken. Money is broken. You go, I don't know. I got on the train just fine. I got on a plane to get over here. I don't know. And then just, all based on a monetary unit that nobody here recognizes. If I walked around with a pocket full of cash US dollars and go, hey, can I have a Coke? They go, I don't take those. What are you talking about? Like, it's cute. I mean, I might like put it up on the wall and go, oh, neat. Look, some dumbass American tried to buy a coffee with a $20 bill, but no one's going to trade for it unless I would have to hunt and peck to find somebody that would be willing to go, okay, I'll take this note. I even tried to pay with euros at the hotel. I say, hey, can I pay with euros? They're like, nope, this is an EU country, but I can't use your note. No, you use our note because that's how we coordinate here locally. But the government's settling to Brussels in euros. So they're doing their own conversion, but they're maintaining their sovereign control over their internal coordination. And, probably for good reason. But yeah, it's a big complicated world is kind of what it all boils down to. So even the language thing is a little tricky because we routinely coordinate as Microseed as a company with Chinese companies, Taiwan manufacturers, Turkish manufacturers, Mexican manufacturers. We coordinate global trade and I get stuff on global ships and goes through global ports and it just shows up, but it's all numbers. It's not, it's not language, it's not email. It's money is making it happen. But the language and most of them speak English too, so that's kind of helpful, I guess. Anyway.
I have one more I have to ask because a lot of people are interested in that, and it might fit nicely in here or might not fit nicely in here at all. But Seyr and strategy, we had that, and Seyr's changed a lot in like how he speaks about Bitcoin, what he thinks about those things, and
Right.
now he has the whole stretch thing, and now his theory is kind of like, okay, we have the layer 1 Bitcoin, we have the layer 2, the digital credit, and like then there's like money on top of that with like the stable coins and like all of that. And I was actually asking before if you think if Bitcoin cannot replace the dollar, but Bitcoin might just replace the being the reserve asset, and we just like put something on there. How do you see Bitcoin treasury companies? Is that just like a thing, or like you're not paying attention to them at all, or like is that potentially a new like Bank of England, central bank, Fed kind of thing?
Maybe. I mean, that's kind of the fun thing about it is like if you have a brand new, like legitimately novel technology, right? Like when someone first invented electricity, people just went, what's this ever going to do? Like, I still have a gas lamp, it works fine. I don't think people could really predict, like, this is electricity. This is not, you know, like kerosene, right? But the same thing happened with like fuel, like crude oil, right? They go, oh, we can replace whale oil. Isn't that handy? But no one really saw what potential was embodied in that thing that someone created and turned into a technology for power, right? But I don't think people really understood fire in the beginning. You know, they just kind of go, oh, yeah, fire, I can keep warm and stuff. And they go, well, wait a minute, we can clear this field and then we'll get some plants that are easier to eat because they're all fresh and new. And the soil's now enriched because we just burned all the old shit out of the way and made like healthy soil. So new plants sprout up that we can pluck much easier than trying to, climb a tree or whatever it is. But the like fire wasn't invented, right? Like it's just kind of created and was part of nature. But human beings learning to harness it was a big shift. But what they ended up doing with it, like I think if you would have gone back to the first caveman who was like, hey, I figured out how to build a fire, you go, oh, one day you're going to be able to fly in the air because of that. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's crazy, dude. Like, I see birds. We've tried flying. I watched Tom do it last week. He fell off the rock and he broke his neck. So like, we'll never be able to fly. But you can't really tell what's going to happen. So when you talk about something like Bitcoin, you go, okay, hey, we've got something that no one's ever had ever in the history of mankind. And we are probably not going to go back to a hunter-gatherer society at scale. Like 8 billion people, if we all had to hunter-gather tomorrow, the planet's going to get stripped dry in about 2 weeks, and then we all die. So chances are good we're not going back there. So chances are good we're going to be fixed settlements. Chances are good we're going to continue agriculture. Chances are good we're going to continue animal husbandry and all those sort of things. And all the coordination is involved in keeping 8 billion people alive every single day. So if that's true, chances are good you're going to have some sort of coordinating technology because that seems to have been the thing that's been working for the last 5,000 years. But now we have a new property right. And you go, well, what does that do to the system? You go, dude, how could you ever possibly predict that? Like, we have no idea what that means. But it's there. It exists. So if you're a treasury company, you go, aha, I've got to figure it out. I can just, stack Bitcoin and do whatever we're going to wait for number to go up and however they're structuring their deals and stuff like that. That might blow up in the face. I think history tends to say, this thing's like I'm gonna break this new technology in by, like when the internet first came along, people go, oh yeah, .com company, everything's .com. That kind of just fell apart, right? So what the promise of what they expected the technology to do versus what it delivered are very different, right? Even just with a recent example that we can all look at and see. People thought the internet was going to do XYZ things. It did do some of those things in a very different way than people thought in the beginning, right? But that didn't stop people from monetizing it early and trying to get theirs at that time. So what Saylor's doing, I go, I don't really know. Like I heard him say in an interview, he like essentially vibe coded some financial instruments. I go, that's probably not a great idea, but I don't know. He's a smart guy. He probably knows more about this shit than I do, and he's got a team of people that are helping him navigate that shit. So I doubt he just sat there and was like, hey, Claude, make me a financial instrument and then just released it into the world, right? Like he's got all kinds of layers of compliance and shit he's got to go through and vetting before someone's going to go, yeah, I think this will work or it won't work, But what that does to his company is sort of like, well, good for you if you can make it work, great, But literally all the things I'm saying are stuff on some level, I'm just kind of parroting what Michael Saylor said a long time ago. He said, well, if you think about Bitcoin as a currency or as money, that's a problem. But he was talking about regulatory risk, legal implications and things like that. So when you think about it as property, it gets rid of a lot of that stuff. And I go, yeah, I agree. But I think just as a technical asset, you go, it looks to me more like a hoarding asset. It looks to me more like a savings technology. It looks to me more like a divisible, non-sovereign granted right of exclusion to property. It's property, I think.
So my dream of we all have one asset that we can save in. We all have and that same asset is also the one that we can pay in and like do all that shit. Like it's just a dream.
Well, I mean, maybe in terms of everybody's paying in it, but the thing that's interesting about Bitcoin as a property asset, as a right of exclusion to valuable property, and it's divisible property, right? Like you never want to pay your taxes in Bitcoin because there's a limited number of Bitcoin. So if you assume that the sovereign's going to give you your Bitcoin back, then I guess you can pay your taxes and hope for a circular economy with the sovereign. But as soon as the sovereign recognizes, like, there's only 21 million of these, I should probably scoop up as many of them as I can. And therefore, I will control these, and then no one else can have them. And that's what the sovereign wants. They want to control assets, right? So giving that up as a tax, you go, it's probably not a great idea. Like you might want to hang on to your sats, right? Like if you had to parcel off a piece of your property every month to pay your tax, sooner or later you're not going to have any property left, right? Like your real estate. So, but in terms of like what that does to a fiat systems have problems. Like they run into limits about like how many claims can we coordinate by debasing the unit. And that has some level of nobody will accept it anymore. And nobody knows where that is. Like, and people will point to like Argentina or Weimar Germany or Turkey or, Lebanon or whatever. And they go, oh yeah, see, that's what happens when fiat collapses. And they go, well, that's what happens when your little dinky, like little side corner of fiat collapses. But that's not a global, like that's very different than the euro collapsed, right? Or the USD collapsed or the yuan collapsed. Like that's not just like, oh, some people are having trouble and people are screaming in the streets because they can't get their bank account. That's like, oh, just global trade just stopped. Oh shit, that's a problem, right? So there's no incentive to allow that to happen. But how they run into those limits is the problem there. And Bitcoin as a reserve asset, like if you hold Bitcoin, you go, well, I'm kind of protected from some of this, right? I'm like me as a holder, me as a resource that's being coordinated by this monetary technology, you can protect yourself from some of that. So if it becomes a thing where it's like, oh, well, we get all the benefits of the fiat system, but like most of the downsides get accommodated because of this property right, that's like a huge win because we get to keep the coordination grid going. We get to keep the, the neat networks and the roads and the healthcare and, whatever. But we don't have to suffer the like, well, we have to coordinate all these extra claims that we don't have enough productive capacity to cover. So we need to debase the unit to keep up with those claims. But there's a thing that can help absorb the debasement so you don't get wrecked in the process, right? And I think that's a viable path for Bitcoin to be something that's transformative. And that was sort of the thesis of my last book, The Great Realignment, was like, I don't know if it becomes like, reserve currency of the globe or something like that. But I do think it can become something that protects companies from debasement. And that alone is like an enormous change in the global financial system. Because companies right now that have to scramble to keep up with the debasement have something where they can shunt that debasement off and just hold it. And they don't have to worry about the sovereign coming in and abusing it. They just go, well, I know for a fact, based on cryptography and, the network of Bitcoin, that this is a sound, viable asset that can't be debased. So I have protection against something the sovereign has to do, which is expand the number of claims that are available, because it's creating more claims than there's productive capacity underneath, right? So if you combine that with like a potential massive increase in productive capacity, like AI or robots or whatever, latest sci-fi fantasy is kind of floating around to drive up somebody's stock price, if those things actually come true, you kind of go, oh, wow. So not only do we have a massive increase in productive floor, we also have a way to manage the negative externalities of trying to expand claims beyond what productive capacity can support. So everybody wins is sort of the end result of that. You go, oh, that sounds great. I go, can I buy my coffee with Bitcoin? No. Is my life awesome anyway? Yeah. Well, what's wrong with that? Like it's kind of the way I look at it. It's like, why wouldn't I want that outcome? Like what problem does that create for you as a Bitcoiner? You go, well, just me having the active defiance right now of holding property that the sovereign can't take might lead to a situation where everyone just gets a little bit better because we're solving some of the frictions in fiat that nobody's been able to solve for 5,000 years. Like, what happens when you debase too much? Well, problems. It always happens. And Bitcoiners understand that better than probably anybody on planet Earth. When you debase too far, you cause a lot of problems. If Bitcoin can fix that, it's a great outcome as far as I'm concerned.
With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. You get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control. And I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together.
Interesting. It might actually like lead to governments being more careful with printing.
Yeah. Well, they may not have to print as much, right? And you can retain more, like the productive floor increases with technology. I think that's part of Jeff Booth's theory. It's like, technology is deflationary by definition, right? Like you can do more with less. So if that continues to be true and you have a way to shunt off inflationary pressure, then Bitcoin becomes something very monumentally important to humanity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the unit of account to do so, if that makes sense.
And the only reason I'm saying dream, because like I was always an investor literally since I was able to open an investment account with 18 years old. I literally did it on the day of my birthday because I was already researching with 17. And after that period, I got lucky. I got in really good investments. I got into Tesla when it shot up. I got into Apple when it shot up. And then naturally, uncles and friends and family just asked me, "Oh, like, what are you doing?" And I tried to like explain to them like how to pick stocks. Like they don't really want to know how to pick stocks. It's first of all like how to do it, and it requires a lot of time. You have to really know the companies. You have to really know like valuations and all of that. And it's a hustle. I love it.
Right.
Like I'm like a big like I love looking at companies and like where is it going and all of that.
Yeah.
But when I try to explain it to them, I'm like, oh, they don't want to learn how to pick stocks like I do.
Right.
They just want their money to be somewhere safe where it accumulates a little bit. They just don't want to lose to inflation.
Right.
They are aware of inflation. They're like, okay, the banana this year costs $2. Next year it costs $2.10. Next year $2.20.
Right.
If I do the calculation of all of that, it's pretty bad. My salary is going up by 5%. My costs are going up by 10%. I'm getting poorer each year.
Right.
I should probably save the excess cash in something that goes up and like put something good in there, so I have some purchasing power and don't have to work till I fall dead.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where I'm like my dream, like my naive dream, but like just a dream came into like, what if the currency that we save in can just be also the savings technology that actually accumulates over time and like gets higher over time. And there's like, wouldn't it be a nice world where people are not forced to invest or like figure out what Bitcoin is, figure out if the SpaceX IPO is a good buy or not
Right.
good buy, or like if Tesla is now overvalued or undervalued, or like if strategy at MNAV 122 is a good one or MNAV 155. Like nobody cares. They just want to be a doctor, a carpenter, and they're just like, I just want to earn money. I want to do good for my family. Want to spend some holidays, and like that's where I'm like, wouldn't it be nice? Like
Yeah.
if the currency that we earn, you just keep it and it just goes up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can do that if you just add the extra step, right? Like,
Yeah.
rather than it just being the unit that you're earning in and then you're saving, it's like, well, you earn and save in a unit and then convert it to an asset, right? You go, well, what's the difference?
Bitcoin kind of as a savings account. Of
Right. Like,
your,
if you just go, well, over time, like, like Lepard's big print, right? Like, I agree with his thesis. Like, they have to print. Yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, almost inevitable, right? There is the other possibility they just start moving the numbers around. They just go, well, this used to be 23 trillion, now it's 1 trillion. Like, and everyone goes, what? Wait, that's not right. How did that work? And go, well, here's all this extra units in your account. So, see, everyone's rich now. And you go, oh, okay. How does that work? Well, we all just kind of got together and that's what we're doing now. Oh, can I still get my groceries? Yeah, but it's just a different number. Okay. Okay, I guess. Like, what am I going to stop buying groceries? Like, you're just going to use the new unit, right?
like we talked before with the Czech krona.
Right.
You get a bill of like 900 Czech krona and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just like 30, 40 bucks.
Right. You're going to do some conversion somewhere, and after about 6 months, it's going to be normal, and you're not going to think about it anymore. If you move to Czech Republic tomorrow, those numbers are going to be a little funky at first because you're going to always be thinking euro to krona. Well, how much is this really? But pretty soon, you're going to understand the unit of account and the standard of deferred payment in the Czech Republic, and you're going to go, oh, okay, well, I need to pay 1,200 krona for this. That's it, right? You're not going to that equation is going to stop occurring in your head, or that math. But if regardless if you're earning in euros or krona or yuan or US dollars or whatever it is, if you just go, well, I'm just going to tranche some of that off into an asset that is volatile in fiat terms, but over the long term, chances are good it's going to absorb a lot of debasement. And I think my core thesis is more and more people are going to kind of look around and go, well, I could go and take a 4-year course in how to manage stocks and probably still get blown up anyway.
Yeah.
Or I could keep trusting, the dickhead that's running the mutual fund at Charles Schwab and, give up 10% to this guy just so he can stack up a bunch of extra fiat units. Or I can just buy some property that no one can take and no one can debase. Well, I just buy the property. And so year by year, you might go up and down, up and down, up and down. But like over 10 years, you go, well, it was better that I bought the Bitcoin than trying to gamble on the IPO of Starfleet Command. What's this?
SpaceX.
SpaceX. Thank you.
Starfleet Command.
Star Trek.
Anthropic, OpenAI, SpaceX, a lot of IPOs back half of this year.
Yeah. So, but like if you don't have to go and study a bunch of crazy shit, and you can just wrap your head around the idea of like, I have property no one can take. You go, that seems like such a simple thesis to me. And it gets complicated because people talk about, oh, it's money, it's this, it's that, it's, electronic cash. And I go, you don't know what that means. Just because you can exchange something doesn't make it cash, doesn't make it money. But it is, I can say with a high degree of certainty, it's a property right that can't be taken from you. Like, that's very clear. You don't have to do any gymnastics in your mind to understand that's a property right that can't be taken. It's valuable. It's globally recognized as a valuable thing. The legacy finance people have now acknowledged that it's a globally recognized valuable thing, and you can just own it. So if that's where the tide is going, just hop on that tide. Stack some sats, stay humble, take self-custody. Don't give that right up because that's the thing that makes it valuable. And then hang on to it and keep hanging on to it and keep saving, putting your excess energy into that thing. And so, yes, you're going to keep getting debased in your dollars. And yes, it's going to keep getting harder to pay your taxes every year. Your banana is going to go up 10 cents per year, whatever it is. But meanwhile, your purchasing power in the background is going to continue growing with the debasement because that's what Bitcoin is really great at, because it's scarce. It's continually becoming more scarce every single day. Every single day, some guy fat fingers something. Every single day, some guy dies. Every single day, some measure of Bitcoin goes away forever. And so whatever you're holding is becoming more scarce every day. And every year, the amount that comes into the system goes down every year. So you go, that's always going to go up. It has to go up unless people stop thinking it's a valuable property. And I think the only way that happens is if I actually can't even really think of a way that happens. But I think the best way to enjoy that property is to actually own it. Those facets of that property, I mean, like the best way to capitalize on that as a human being on planet Earth today is to go down, figure out how to get some Bitcoin and take self-custody, right? And then run a node and participate in the network and make sure that glorious magical invention that Satoshi gifted the world stays viable. And then kind of see what happens, because you have no other control over anything. You have no control over whether SpaceX's IPO is going to work or not. You have no control over whether AI is going to take a job or not. You have no control over whether you're going to have a job tomorrow or not. But you can control what asset you can. That is one thing that you can fundamentally control on planet Earth. It's yours, legitimately yours forever. So, put some time and energy into understanding what that means, and then see what the world does with it. Because we can't say, like, no one can predict where that asset goes or what becomes of it.
Do you think Satoshi had a different vision for Bitcoin?
Yes, very much. Like, I think you can read the white paper. Like all of the ideas in that white paper are oriented around commodity theory. It needs to be scarce, it needs to be divisible, and if you can't debase it, therefore it's good money. But that's rooted in ideas that don't necessarily withstand scrutiny. If you really unpack those ideas and you go, well, what are we really talking about here? You go, oh, well, I guess it's a little more complicated than that. Like, if that was all it took to make a currency, then someone would have figured it out by now, but no one did. And so just because someone came up with an idea because they thought it was a thing, it turned out to be something else. Like, kerosene was a waste fluid, right? But someone figured out you can make money with it. And from that, we now have like plastics and like an entire, like almost everything on planet Earth is because of petroleum products. But the guy who first dug that stuff up was like throwing the gasoline away. It was a problem for them. You go, oh, whoops. Oh, I didn't realize when I first invented the technology to utilize this asset, I thought it was good for one very limited use case that I didn't really understand all that well. Because I never pictured that someone might turn this into a car. I never pictured that someone might turn this into an airplane. I never pictured someone might turn this into a cup and a lamp and glassworks and a fiber optic cable and. They never saw it coming because you can't. You can't see the future. You can't see what that technology means. You can tell in that moment, like John D. Rockefeller did. He went, I don't know exactly what this is, but I'm pretty sure it's going to change stuff. I want to get as much of it as I can. I'm saying to you, the dear viewer, like Bitcoin is going to do something. I can't tell you what that's going to be. I don't think anyone can. If anyone's telling you definitively this is what Bitcoin is and this is the only thing it can do, I go, that person has a very limited imagination and a very, very, very tight view of what history tells us about new technologies.
It's a good point, because if you think about even like a very modern example, Facebook, they started as a university dating platform.
Yeah.
It's still that, but also a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you think about just the invention of like the car, now they're not just driving on like a small free tire thing, they are driving themselves. It's AC, it's like almost a small house, like you can live in it.
Yeah.
It's like early inventions start out as like a small single use case, and you cannot predict what happens in like 140 years.
You can't even predict what's going to happen in 10 years, especially when you introduce human creativity. And like we were just talking yesterday, I mean, there's like all those Nigerian Bitcoiners and all the people in Africa, like they're doing stuff down there that we haven't really thought of because we don't have to. We don't have to. We're thinking about like, well, my savings is going down, so I want to protect my savings. They're looking at like, how can I turn this into something bigger than that? And whether it turns out to be a good idea, a bad idea, they might come up with some use case. You go, oh God, I never thought of that, but that's genius. Like, oh my God, if we did XYZ thing with Bitcoin, that means we can fix XYZ thing, and that's going to make XYZ thing 10,000 times better. But if you could think of every creative use case for something, then you would be the most creative person that's ever lived. You'd be a creative god. But, most people get a flash of insight that they exploit to great benefit, and it's limited, right? I'm talking most people that invent things will have like a little flash of insight.
You just made me think about like why Bitcoiners are so obsessed with the mean of exchange part of Bitcoin. Because it doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
Like people get mad at me. That,
maybe
but
we're in deep water now.
but if you think about what is the most Bitcoiners want to have the number go up. Mean of exchange is not necessary for that
at all.
You need a lot of money coming in and hoarding.
Yes.
You don't need to like
buy a coffee,
exchange as like the Bitcoin currency. And so that is not necessary for it. It might actually be bad for the thing, because if people just hoard it, borrow against it, like do all this, like I don't want to give up my sats. I'm willing to go balls deep into that,
right.
but I do not give up my sats. Like I want to have that. I recently listened to like a divorce lawyer on Bitcoin, and he had a client. He said like, she can have everything, but she cannot have my Bitcoin. She can have my house. She can have this. She can have Bitcoin do not take my sats. Do not take my Bitcoin.
Right.
And so if that's actually if we just focus on that, it's digital property. It's the best form of property right that you ever had. Nobody can take it away from you. That's why Bitcoin goes from a 1 million market cap to 1 trillion to 20 trillion, 200 trillion, wherever we go, whatever we measure it in. So you just made me think of like, why are we so obsessed with the unit, using it as a currency? It's a small part of it.
Well, there is a slight technical tangent to that about the security budget, right? And that's what the BSB guys are always harping about. Like, how do you pay the miners? But the thing is, like, there are number go up units where it's like it's always profitable to mine, right? Like if you go to a $1 trillion per Bitcoin, like your security budget is paid for pretty much forever, right? Like the security budget's not an issue. The security budget becomes an issue if Bitcoin stays at like 20 grand forever, right? Like if you're only getting 20 grand per block, it's like, how do we keep all these mining machines going? Like you don't, right?
And there's the difficulty adjustment.
Right, of course,
if miner gets out, difficulty adjustment gets down,
right?
Until more miners get incentivized to get in.
Right.
I think it's always incentivized to be barely profitable.
Right. Theoretically, right?
Theoretically, yeah.
But there is some, and that's another point of debate in Bitcoin circles, right? Like when does that run out? So I think that's part of the idea of like, well, you need to be using these units. They need to be circulating so you can always ensure fees and things like that. But I think the amount of transactions you'd have to do is pretty large. But if the number is always going up, then it kind of doesn't matter, right? And if like 21 million divided by infinity is true, then you go, well, then it's always going to go up. Like it can't not go up because there's infinity dollars and there's 21 million Bitcoin. And right now, who knows how many Bitcoin are actually accessible and usable. So, I mean, but leaving that aside, I agree with you. Like you go, well, but it's also Gresham's law straight up. I mean, it's like something that all Bitcoiners should be very familiar with, Gresham's law. Like the, good money chases out the bad, right? You hoard the good stuff and you sell the shitty stuff, right? You trade the shitty stuff. If the king has cut your coins in half from 100% silver to 50% silver, 50% copper, you spend the 50% copper. You don't give away the silver because the silver's got some value to it. So why would you ever want to pay your taxes or buy a coffee or something? Like if you have a perfectly good piece of paper that will get you a coffee, why would you want to trade your incredibly rare, incredibly valuable sats to get that same coffee? Especially if the fiat thing is already working. You just kind of go, well, just use fiat, and use your fiat, to chase the good money into your account and get all the bad money out of your account. And then sooner or later, you're going to have a lot more of those units. And whatever you need to do at that time, you can convert at that time and use it if you need to, or you just keep making fiat and be a resource that's being extracted. Figure out some of those games, because you have to live on this planet. And this planet is currently governed by a fiat system, period. Full stop. There's no magical other system that's just waiting in the wings. There's nothing even close to replacing fiat. Not even in the neighborhood of being able to coordinate global resources the way fiat currencies do. So like exist in the world that exists, and then save for the world that's probably coming.
When you say fiat system, do you also take in government, and like is government part of the fiat system?
It's part and parcel. Like all of this exists because of a sovereign, right? Like markets exist because of the sovereign. Everything that we do and think about and exist in is because of a sovereign somewhere. And then the sovereigns are all competing amongst each other to, gain more or less advantage or whatever, or just navigate the sovereign world. But none of this occurs without that. And there are people that sort of fantasize about what the world would be like without rules and all this kind of stuff. And I go, well, there's 15,000 years of history that says that doesn't happen. Like, sooner or later, people have to coordinate things, and fairness comes into it, and obligations come into it. Like, you can't have a society without somebody being obligated to do something in that society, or else the whole thing falls apart. So how do you make that fair? And how do you get the people to do that? And how do you get people to maintain the roads and the power lines and this and that and the other thing? Oh, we'll let the market sort it out. Like, markets occur because of the sovereign, because the sovereign has created a condition where markets make sense. They don't just magically appear as like if there's no Hazda. The Hazda are a tribe that live in Africa. They're hunter-gatherers, or sort of roughly immediate return hunter-gatherers. There's no market for goods in the Hazda tribe. You can go to South American, like Amazonian rainforest tribes, and go, hey, where's your market for shoes? And they go, we don't. I just make some shoes. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't need a market. I just go and, like, when I'm hungry, I go pluck some fruit and I save up some nuts. I mean, there's, so that logic doesn't even exist. But the second you have a resource node, and then people that need to coordinate around the resource node, like a field of wheat or, farms or stuff like that, then all of a sudden those things start making sense, because, well, you have to pay a certain amount of tribute, and how do we pay the tribute? Well, you have excess. So you take excess from production and give it to the state. How do you get the excess? Well, I have to do things where I can get more excess so I can have some, and then the state can get some. What's an easy way to do that? Well, I'll just make some tools and I'll sell them for wheat. And then instead of having to go work on a field, I can just make a tool and I can get the wheat, and I can pay that. I can pay my obligation to the state in wheat that way. I'll get my wheat that way. You just created a market, But you can do that at the household level. Like, if you had 10 kids right now, and you say, hey, you all have tasks you have to do. I'll give you a marble each for every time you do a task. Well, probably one of your kids is going to be a slick little dude or gal. It's just like, wait a minute. If I just kind of do a couple things in the background and make it so, like, I get like a little more marbles than everybody else, I can just give people the marbles that they want already. I don't have to do anything, and my obligations are satisfied. But how would you do that if you're the slick, kind of brainy little kid? Like, well, you create a market, you start trading things, you start creating things to trade to them, so you can have your marbles or whatever it is, so you can get other things from the other kids. You can watch kids create markets in a kindergarten setting just by being slick like that. Like, Mark Twain wrote an entire book about Tom Sawyer creating a market for labor and compelling labor by a little bit of trickery and shenanigans, and, getting kids to paint the fence, because, there's all of this comes from the need to satisfy obligations, is sort of my core thesis here. And without the need to coordinate obligations, a lot of this stuff just doesn't exist. You just go, you don't really need any of that, right? If you can just go kind of hunt and gather your way through life, you never need a market for anything, So that's the idea there, I guess. Like,
I love that. Like, we're talking since like almost 2 hours, and
oh my goodness,
I barely got, like, I feel like I barely scratched the surface. So we have to do that another time again.
indeed. Yeah.
I have a few more questions.
Oh, sure.
I have one thing that you mentioned that I never heard from you, but like, I'm super intrigued, because like, one question that I actually get a lot is like, when do you buy Bitcoin?
Oh,
like when do you buy, when do you sell? Like I said, like, just never sell. Just like, maybe it's a good thing to like time the buys a little bit. Like, when everyone is calling you and the grandma wants Bitcoin, might just be not the best time to buy Bitcoin.
right.
Like, if you have a 10, 20, 30 year time horizon, it's always a great time to buy Bitcoin.
Right.
But if you already have Bitcoin and you already have exposure, and you play a little bit with, still have some fiat, you might want to consider like using the knowledge that is in the space to time your buys. Now there's different strategies. For example, would have been, I actually looked it up. There would have been an amazing strategy to just go with the fear and greed index.
Yeah.
Such a simple, weird, small tool. If you just take the fear and greed index under 20 and you just only bought when it was under 20, you would have outperformed Bitcoin by a margin, like
Oh,
by
yeah.
a fair margin.
Yeah.
Because always is in fear when like the market is
Yeah.
really red.
Yeah.
There's like the power law, obviously. There's like all those like different models,
Trading strategies.
trading strategies. And I was almost surprised that you had something like that. And I was like, I want to talk. I want to kind of get your take on like the question that every Bitcoiner kind of likes to ask themselves, like, oh, I have some cash laying around. Should I buy now? Should I wait?
I know from research that large one-off buys tend to outperform DCA buys in terms of just like nominal fiat returns on a thing, right? If you go all in at 16K and then you just ride it to 128K and then back down to 60K or wherever we end up going, you're probably going to do better than some of the DCA all the way up, right? But it was because of my brief period in shitcoin trading that I came up with this little strategy, right? And it's very rudimentary. It's just, a couple of like simple moving average and exponential moving average, and then the RSI, and whether the RSI crosses a midpoint or not. And I back tested it, and back in the day, it was to try and time buys and sells. Now it's just a time to time buys, right? So my core thesis for me personally is to just go, okay, well, I will wait until my little indicator thing flips up, gives me a positive signal, and I'll save my fiat pennies until I get to that point. And then when that happens, I'll just dump it all and see what happens. And I used this to great effect in the last bear market. Like I missed the entire downside, all that like plummeting prices and people just riding that, catching the falling knife and buy the dip and all this kind of stuff. I was just like, nope, just sitting on my hands on a big pile of cash and just going, sooner or later, this thing's going to flip over and I'm going to buy. And I've got the receipts. Like I had a big smash buy at 16.2 straight up. I can show you the screenshot. It was on Kraken because I was still kind of in that mode at that time. And I was going around telling people I worked with, like, I can't say that it won't go down. And like, people may not remember, but if you go back to Bitcoin Twitter at that time, like it's going to 12, it's going to 10, we're going all the way to 6K. And this is like, nobody has any idea. All I know is my little trading indicator idea that I have, which is a shit idea. And who knows? But for me personally, I go, that's close enough that I feel like I can relatively time a buy. And so I told many, many people, dozens, I can't say it won't go down from here, but I'm buying. Like this thing to me, like I think this is probably a good time to buy Bitcoin. And the only reason I told people to wait up to that point was because I think people tend to feel better about making a decision when the number goes up rather than the number goes down. If you tell someone like, you should buy Bitcoin, always buy Bitcoin, it's 128K, and you go, should you buy Bitcoin? Should I buy Bitcoin right now? Yes, absolutely, buy Bitcoin. And then it nukes 50%. They just go, that guy's a dick. He told me this is a great time to buy Bitcoin. I just lost half my money. They don't understand the fiat system is debasing you at 9% a year, and every year your purchasing power is eroding, and it's getting harder to produce, and blah, 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 like all the macroeconomic shit. They just go, dude, I asked you if this is a good time. You said yes. Good time to them is, am I going to make money now? Not good time is like, did I get off zero, right? So just kind of meeting someone where they are, I go, if I can time someone, if I can just nudge someone, get them over the line to not even think this is a scam or a Ponzi scheme or some retarded thing to get into to begin with. And then I go, look, I really believe in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the most important financial technology that's ever been invented in the history of mankind. People hear that and they go, this guy's a lunatic. Like, what are you talking about? I go, I got reasons. I thought about this deep and hard. I wrote a book about it, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't matter. They just go, you're crazy. My financial guy said that Bitcoin's a scam. So you're just some dude that I work with. Like, why should I listen to you, right? But if I can finally get someone over the hump and start just giving them enough information, they kind of go, okay, I kind of get what you're saying. Like this whole conversation we just had, it's probably, I don't know what percentage of people on planet Earth are like following this, tracking it 1-to-1, and just like, I get it now. Yeah. Like fiat system is deeply complex and it's a complex layered order with, like most people are like, what? What is he talking about? Like coordination, obligations, and fucking Mesopotamia? Like what's any of this mean, right? But if I can get someone just over the hump enough that they can get orange pilled just enough, and then all of a sudden the number goes up, and they went, "Holy shit, dude! Like that dude told me to buy Bitcoin. And I put $1,000 in. Like I got like $5,000 now. Like that's good, right?" Whether or not they keep going and learn more, I don't know. But what I can report from that period is all the people that did get over the hump and finally did buy, and none of them bought at 16. None of them bought at 24. I got a handful in at around 40 and a few more around 60, right? But each layer, I'm like, it was a really good time to buy when I told you to buy. It's probably a good time, but I don't know. Like Bitcoin is not a predictable asset. It can go down. You could buy it today and lose all your money tomorrow. I don't know. But each one of them all came back and asked more questions later. And usually it's like, should I sell now? And I go, well, here's some more information about Bitcoin. Here's some things you should think about. Here's some things you should learn. I can't tell you if you should sell or not. I'm not selling, but you got to make your own financial decisions. But here's some more information. Now, if you can inspire someone to learn more, to actually get orange pilled, to actually go, oh, I get it. It's not about buy and sell. It's about like, I have something that no one can take. And this is probably going to be a very valuable thing 20 years from now. I should probably hang on to it now, regardless of what it does in the next year or two. Like, it's not going to matter to me 20 years from now. 20 years from now, I'm going to look back and go, that dude told me to buy Bitcoin. I did. He told me to sit on it. I did. And holy shit, the world looks very different to me now. Wow. Oh my God. What a blessing, right? Most people aren't going to get there, but the ones that you can help do that, you've given them a great gift, I think. So that's my advice. Always get off zero. Don't sit on zero. That's a terrible place to be. If you're really worried about how you convey yourself to other people that don't understand as deeply as you do, be careful because you can lose friends by telling them to buy the tops, But if you have some means of saying, like, even if you use the fear and greed index and you go, well, fear is 20, like, it's probably a good time to buy right now. But if it's greed, you go, I'd wait a little bit. Just, it's probably going to come down. Like, people are really frothy. I mean, you don't have to, like, be committal about it, but just as best you can, if you have a means to do so, and I seem to have a semi-reliable means to do so, I can kind of tell people, when they ask me right now, should I buy Bitcoin? I go, you might want to wait. That's all I say. It's always a great time to get into Bitcoin. It's always good to have some if you understand what you're doing. But most people don't want to do that. So you go
hook them from the start with the number grab technology.
Hook them with, and then hope that they use that opportunity to learn what they actually hold. Because it's a difficult concept to wrap your head around. But once you get it, you can't look back. You'll never look back. I'll never look back. There's never going to be a point in my life where I go, oh, that was, yeah, well, now I'm thinking about Solana, or maybe I'll get into strategy, or maybe I'll do some AI stock. It's like, I go, no, I already know. I know what I know, and I know what I think, and I know the reasons I think so. And based on all that, I go, I don't know where it goes, but I know this is probably a good idea.
I love that.
Thanks.
It's really nice because like you, after some time, like in the beginning, I was like, yeah, all in, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably a good idea to have some emergency fund. It's probably a good idea to have some fiat runway.
Yeah.
Which I just found the advantages this year, literally like December last year. I'm like, oh yeah, it's not a bad idea to just be all in 100% in Bitcoin,
Right.
and to be dependent on the price of Bitcoin on that day. We have an end routine, as you might know.
Yeah.
Where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is. And the previous guest asked you the question, how do you see the aggregated impact of AI on Bitcoin over time?
I think AI is an open question still. I don't think even the people designing and working on AI truly understand what they're building or how it's working under the hood. I have a lot of experience working with, these large language models just as a user, not like, And I spent a lot of time trying to break them. Like, where do they fall apart? Where is this, And once you get into that world, you kind of go, yeah, depending on what task it's trained on and what it's doing. And I think a lot of it's hype right now. I think it's a lot of just trying to find a market fit for a technology that's very unproven. I think there's probably going to be some sort of catastrophic outcome or semi-catastrophic outcome from people over relying on a thing they don't really understand to make decisions that are important and impactful. And once that becomes an institutionalized process where they go, oh yeah, we just trust the robot to make those decisions, but the robot has already manipulated them in ways they don't understand yet, that becomes problematic. So what does that do to Bitcoin? I go, man, who cares? Yeah, I mean, ultimately, right? Like, I don't think the coordination technology of money is going away. I don't think the way global trade gets coordinated goes away. I don't think the way everyone is accustomed to living life on planet Earth currently under the modern paradigm goes away. I think because of that, Bitcoin will always be something that's going to matter, at least for the foreseeable future. Next 100 years, minimum time frame for me. I don't think I'll live to see the end of that time frame. So right now on planet Earth, existing in the system that I know that exists, I go, well, it's a fiat system. I live in a fiat world, and fiat has problems. It's always had problems since the first guy that came up with the idea of like a grain loan back in Mesopotamia. They ran into problems with that. They'd have to do jubilees. They'd have to do resets. They'd have to, because people would get indebted, they'd have a bad crop. They couldn't pay their loan back. And then some guy in the background just got his land or got to take his wife or his daughter or something like that. And people went, that's probably not a great, we need to fix that. But that always just happens when you come up with these coordination games, right? So knowing that and knowing a 10, 12, 15,000 year history of like the coordination game gets screwed up just by incentives and malincentives and disasters and things. If you can have something that isn't really affected by any of that stuff, that's probably a good thing to have. So that's where I ride. Go, is AI going to disrupt that? Maybe, probably, I don't know. Likely, seems like it. Is something bad going to happen because of it? Probably. Is something really good going to happen because of it? Probably. So what should you do? How should you plan for what's that going to do to Bitcoin? I go, probably good. Like on balance, if AI screws a bunch of stuff up and they have to print their way out to fix the problem, then good for Bitcoin. If it makes productivity really great and then Bitcoin goes up because they're getting even more claims that they need to manage because more people expect more things, good for Bitcoin. You go, if AI just turns out to be a dud and all these companies go to zero and they got to bail them all out and all this kind of crazy shit, good for Bitcoin. So just buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin. Like, it's easy thesis, in a very complex, very layered, deeply nuanced world. There's a very, very simple idea that's floating around that's as easy to grab as 12 words. You just go, if I have that, I have something that most people on planet Earth haven't. I enjoy a right that nobody on planet Earth, except for Bitcoiners, enjoy. So I'll just take that and see what happens. Because I might get hit by a bus. I might leave the studio and get flattened. And I go, well, what did that do for Bitcoin? Well, I just made them more scarce. So you're welcome, right? But if provided I don't get hit by a bus, I go, kind of like the world's always in flux. All this shit's always changing. Every generation, every society throughout history has experienced exactly the stresses we're experiencing. Oh my God, this local, temporarily bounded stressors. There's a war, there's a conflict, there's a famine, the crop failure, this, that, the king wants too much wheat, the king wants too much oil, the king wants too much silver, the king wants too much fiat, the king wants too much this, the king wants too much, So you're going to find an invasion, you're going to find a crack, you're going to find a seam, you're going to wiggle around it, and you're just going to keep existing. Because that's the innate natural drive. I want to survive. I want to propagate my lineage. We're programmed to like spread our seed and make more of us, right? I don't think that's going away. So what's the likelihood a bunch of people are just going to give up on that idea? 0. So people are going to figure something out. And there's a lot of us now. There's 8.9 billion people on planet Earth trying to figure out how to make all this shit work. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it going to be problematic? Yes. Is AI going to change that? Yes. Is Bitcoin the one thing that's constant through all that? Yes. Like unmistakably, unquestionably, yes. That is an unchanging thing. And unless people come and screw it up or fork it or blow it up or, I don't know, aliens come and compromise the network, who knows? But as far as I can tell, I go, I don't see any of those things happening. So I'm going to go that way.
I think aliens invading Earth is the most likely situation that Bitcoin actually fails. So
Yeah,
I'll leave it with that.
probably. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. For people that wanna check out more about what you have to say and your book and all the things, where can they find you?
Most of the time I'm posting now under the Microseed thing, so it's Microseed underscore IO on Twitter, or was it Daniel21E15 on Twitter as well? That's my personal handle. I don't really post there that much. Microseed IO is probably the easiest way to reach out to me if you want to contact. But yeah, and the book is forthcoming. It's Architectures of Obligation. Just waiting on some things. But once that's out, I'll probably be talking about that a lot. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Daniel,
thank you.
for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.